Okay, here's a puzzle that sits at the very heart of the business world. Why do some companies that create enormous value for all of us, end up failing spectacularly, while others seem to just effortlessly print money? It's a huge question, and the answer reveals a fundamental truth that most people, even business leaders, totally miss. And it all starts with one single massive number: $160 billion. Think about that. Back in 2012, that's how much revenue the US airlines generated. They flew millions of us around, connected cities, made modern life possible. So, after all that work, what did they actually get to keep? 37 cents. That's it. For every single passenger they flew, the entire airline industry captured an average profit of just 37 cents. It's an absolutely shocking disconnect, right? How can you create so much for society and capture so little for yourself? Well, to really get it, let's put them side by side with a company that has the exact opposite problem. The airlines created 3 times more value in raw revenue than Google did that year, but Google's profit margin was over 100 times bigger. And that right there is the whole game. Creating value is not the same thing as capturing value, and figuring out how to do the second part is what separates a pretty good business from a world-changing one. To really understand why, we have to go back to a core idea we all think we know. It turns out the entire business world really operates on just 2 opposing models. We think we get them, but their real-world consequences are hiding in plain sight. Let's start with the one economists tell us is just the default state of things: perfect competition. This is a pretty brutal world. It's a world where you and all your rivals are basically selling the same thing. Think about the airlines again. Anytime there's a tiny sliver of profit to be made, someone new jumps in, they slash prices to get customers, and poof, the profit is just gone. A monopoly. We're not talking about some mustache-twirling villain from a board game. We're talking about a company that has become so uniquely good at what it does, like Google and search, that there just aren't any close substitutes. They aren't just in a market, they pretty much own their market. And this leads to a conclusion that just flips everything on its head. This is the big idea right here. We're all taught that capitalism is competition, but think about it. Capitalism is about accumulating capital, right? Making profits. And as we just saw, perfect competition absolutely destroys profits. So the lesson is incredibly simple. If you want to build a business that actually lasts, you have to find a way to escape competition. So, if the business world is really this black and white, a brutal fight to the death on one side and being in a league of your own on the other, why doesn't everyone see it so clearly? Why does everything just look like a murky middle? Well, the answer is simple. Everybody's lying. We tend to think of all businesses as being kind of similar, existing on this smooth spectrum. But the reality isn't a spectrum, it's a chasm. The gap between a truly competitive firm and a monopoly is just vast. So why are we so confused? Because both sides have a massive incentive to lie about where they really are. And this brings us to the 2 great lies of the business world. And I promise you, once you learn how to spot these, you will never, ever look at a press release or a startup pitch the same way again. First up, let's talk about the giants. Monopolists lie to protect themselves. The absolute last thing they want is a giant spotlight from regulators, or heaven forbid, to invite a bunch of new challengers into their space. So what do? They pretend to be this tiny, vulnerable little player in a huge, dangerous market full of scary competitors. And Google is the absolute master of this. They are a true monopoly in search. But when they have to talk to Congress or the public, do they ever mention the search market? Nope. Instead, they define their market as the union of a bunch of other huge markets. They'll say, oh, we're in the online advertising market, or the total US advertising market, or even the global advertising market. And just like that, their massive monopoly suddenly looks like a teeny tiny slice of a giant hyper-competitive pie. Companies that are stuck in that brutal competitive world, they tell the exact opposite lie. They are desperate to look special, to attract investors and talent and customers. So they go around claiming to be in a league of their own by defining their market so incredibly narrowly that by definition, they're the only one in it. And this is their formula: the intersection of a bunch of tiny little niches. An entrepreneur will say, we're opening the only British food restaurant in Palo Alto. We own the entire market. But hang on, the real market is restaurants in Palo Alto. And that market, that's a bloodbath. They've just told themselves a very convenient story to hide a really terrifying truth. You see this same flawed logic pop up everywhere, especially in creative fields. A movie pitch isn't just a thriller, it's a sci-fi horror comedy. It's totally unique. It's never been done before, but maybe there's a really good reason for that. This kind of self-deception is an absolutely fatal temptation. And this is where it gets dangerous. The biggest mistake you can possibly make is to believe your own hype, to focus on some trivial little difference while totally ignoring the dozen other businesses fighting for the exact same customers. Being brutally honest about the reality of competition is the first crucial step to actually escaping it. Okay, so now we know the lies. Let's actually use it to see the world as it really is by looking at a real-world example of a master at work. This quote from Google's chairman is just a perfect specimen of the monopolist lie. Listen to the language he's using. Extremely competitive, multitude of options. But what is he really saying? The translation is pretty simple. He's telling regulators, hey, move on. Nothing to see here, folks. It is a masterful piece of PR, all designed to hide the true scale of their dominance by making their pond seem like a massive ocean. So it all boils down to this really simple framework. Monopolists use the math of union, adding big markets together to make themselves look small. Competitors use the math of intersection, combining tiny niches to make themselves look unique. One pretends to be a small fish in a huge pond, the other pretends to be the only fish in a tiny puddle. So here's the question I want to leave you with, because this isn't just about analyzing huge corporations. It's a lens for seeing the truth everywhere. The next time you hear a company describe its market, ask yourself, are they describing a union or an intersection? And more importantly, when you look at your own work, your own career, your own business, are you genuinely building a lead of your own? Or are you just telling yourself a really convenient story? The answer could make all the difference.